go. We will get started in just a moment. Let's get started. I'm just going to jump right in and see if I can pop Rob Glenn in here, if I may, and I think that I can. Hi, everybody. Hi, chat room. Welcome to the show. It's Hal Sparks Mornings, Megaworldwide. Like, subscribe, give a thumbs up, support the show. And hello, there you all are. And I want you to know that you are seen, and I see you. Meanwhile, I've got to put Rob in here by turning on this. There we go. Oh. Look at that. Yes.
Hi. Hello, everybody.
So, you're not supposed to do the show high. What the heck? We had a rule. Well, it was more of a guideline than a rule.
Yeah.
Right. But
how
are you this fine morning?
People in chat think I'm high all the time, which I'm not.
Well, we're nerd high. Let me tell you the monster that Rob Glenn has helped create, ladies and gentlemen, if I will. There you go. Now you're better.
Yeah. I don't know where you're going with this.
Yeah. Well, you know exactly where I'm going. So in our quest, by the way, and welcome to the show, and hi, and thanks for being here. And you know me, I love being right all the time, and it's one of my defining characteristics. Not that I'm right all the time, but that I enjoy it. That's the thing about me. And so you and I, we started chit-chatting offline about AI when this stuff started percolating. And there's again, it's sort of like the physics of a quarterback where if I throw the ball and I basically understand where the wind is, if I throw the ball at this force with this spiral, like I've done many times before, it is going to arc and it is going to land pretty much right near the 20-yard line, give or take a couple of feet, for variables, and start its arc down right where I want it to. So the guy that's 6'3", that's my, receiver can catch it, right? And so that's what practice is for. And if you've done it enough times, whether it's cultural or technological or whatever, you can see that arc. Now, sometimes there's a force accelerator. You do that, and there's a wind at your back that gusts up at the last second, and you didn't know it, right? And it just carries the ball that much further, and you overshoot, and you're like, what the hell? And then, if the wind continues, and you're like, oh, this is now how we live, you compensate for that. You don't throw half as hard, and the ball still goes to the same spot, okay? So that's what AI is. AI is a giant technological wind at people's back that they're adjusting to, I think. And you and I have been talking about, like, we sat there and we're like, okay, if this looks like it's going to lead to this, and if this leads to this, then this is definitely leading to this, and if this leads to this, then exponential growth arc, and then all bets are off, right? And that seems to be where finally people are catching up too, with us going ahem.
Yeah. So before we got on, I talked about. I mean, everybody. We should start with DeepSeek, obviously.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about that. And maybe the spin, because I was saying earlier that everybody said everything about DeepSeek. So
yes.
I was thinking
they're blue in the
maybe
fucking
we
face.
could kind of talk about our thought process as it started to come out, and and because this is going to happen again, more than once, again and again and again, because it's really volatile,
right?
And that's what new technology is. So I sort of put into my head like a couple of thoughts on when it first came out. The first one was, it's coming from China, so you automatically should be skeptical. Right?
Yeah. The news about it, especially like the technology itself, who can say? But yes.
Yeah. The news about it and the facts that are part of the news, right? And the facts that came out at the early was that they did it really fast, really cheap. And how did they do it? Right? So the first thing is the technology, right? They did it on old NVIDIA technology.
Allegedly.
Maybe, but maybe not. Like this is China, and if they've got a bunch of H100s sitting over to the side that they don't tell anybody about, who says they didn't use them, right? Like,
and if they do say that they did have them or did use them, somebody sold it to them, that person is in trouble, and that person isn't going to sell them anymore if that's what they want. Yeah. So they have to lie about it anyways, just to cover because of sanctions. And those sanctions, because of Biden, because of Trump, and because of national security and all kinds of other things, aren't going anywhere. Those sanctions are not going to be lifted this year, if not next year or the year after. If anything, they're going to get ratcheted down even more now because people are sort of realizing what you're talking about.
Right. So the next sort of step is, that doesn't preclude them from having made an advancement. Like they could easily have made an advancement. So you take the good, you take the bad, and you're like, okay, let's kind of think about this a little more. The second part is it's open source. Yeah. So it started from open source, and then they released, not all the information, but some of the information. And so the way that things like this work is if you wanted to verify whether or not what they said is true, then you replicate it. And so there's a lot of smart people in the open source community, and sure, maybe they did it like they said they did it. Well, here we go. Let's replicate it and see if they did. And while you're replicating it, you're going to learn
how they did it.
How they did it. Exactly.
Yeah.
The next level is, this is technology, as you say, and its obvious arc is that the first time you do it, it's going to take you a long time, and it's going to be really expensive, and it's going to take a lot of resources. And then the second time you do it, it's going to take less. And the third time you do it, it's going to take less. And so what they're really doing is they started with what effectively would be, I'll call it old technology, because the open source community in theory would be one step behind. I'm not suggesting that they are. I'm just saying, like, OpenAI and Google, they have the resources they're working on the next gen, right?
Right.
And they might be going slower for various reasons, that they would be going slower because it's a business. Yeah. And so they started with effectively like, I don't know, maybe you call it like the ChatGPT 4. They started with that, and that came out in like an equivalent. I'm kind of just using general terms. Sure. And that came out in December, late December. And then there R1, which is very similar to O1 in
the reasoning aspect of it. That's why they put an R in there.
That's the one that just came out. Okay, so when that came out, they said, we did it for whatever, 5 million, 7 million, whatever they said, and we did it on this old hardware. Well, let's check your math here.
Right.
What about all the development you did up till end of December?
Exactly.
And what did that do? Like
zero.
You just didn't.
Right.
You just decided not to add that, right?
Yeah,
So,
it's what analogy has come to me over and over again is, did you ever see the movie Desperado, the first in the like the Antonio Banderas gangster movies or whatever? And the story about that movie was a lot like the story around the Blair Witch Project, which this movie was done for $7,000, right? That's remember that? That was the story, which he definitely did it on the cheap, absolutely. But the what they don't tell you is that all the post, both the color correction that had to be done on it, never mind the advertising campaign to get it known, which is half the budget of any movie these days anyway. So every $40 million movie you see is $20 million worth of ads. So understand that to start with. So every $40 million movie you've seen costs $20 million, probably $10 million to shoot, right? But the editing, music, all that kind of stuff. Okay, they re-up, the studio bought it. They redid the soundtrack. They color corrected the whole thing. They arguably reshot a few scenes to fix them. They did inserts that didn't exist and that kind of stuff. And so they took this $7,000 kind of demo and then they blew it up in the same way that a record company will sometimes get the demos of an artist and then hand them over to a mastering guy who charges $10,000 a second to do an album, and he turns it into a work of art because that's his fucking job. And so but what Desperado did was it piggybacked on all of the film industry beforehand. Number one is it's way cheaper to shoot a film now because, oh my God, cameras are so cheap. The cameras you can buy on the cheap now are a $5,000 camera is a $100,000 camera from 1991, right? That's incredible, okay? And the same thing is true of this. Did you shoot it on an iPhone? Yeah. But where did the Carl Zeiss lens process come from? It came from the entire film industry and NASA working out all your lens problems. So the idea that you just invented the idea of filmmaking because you did it with your phone, and they go, we did this all with a phone. No, you didn't. The phone gave you the ability to do it. You still get credit for the art, but the technology that happened, the only reason it's possible is because all the other tech had been done first. And then the same situation here with DeepSeek or Deep Shit or whatever, DeepSuck, was that it cost us $6 million on top of the $14 billion that Gemini had been created with and OpenAI had been created with, et cetera, et cetera.
If you kind of break it down into simple terms, you could effectively say they started with a llama because that's open source. So then you have to count if they would have started from scratch, if they were actually ahead of us, then they would have been also working on their own version of that. But that's not what they did. They used it as the starting point there. They used it in the process of training it. Okay. So you're basically not counting a lot of stuff. So that's BS, right?
Right. And wait, let me show this so that they know what you're talking about real quick. I want to show this real quick right here. So this is GitHub. This is a website where it's an AI oriented tech hub on the web where you can download models onto your local computer and use them. And DeepSeek R1 is right there. If you have the computers capable of running it, which aren't all that much, a computer that would run it as well as it can be run is about 14 grand. You'd need 3 video cards to run it at its top level, the same way you would if it was an open source model of ChatGPT. And of course, more helps, but whatever.
There's limits on workstations. There's limits, but you're probably right. 10 to 15, you could probably run it really well locally.
Yeah, exactly. As well as the Rob Glenn 99% rule, is what I'm talking about. The Rob Glenn 99% rule, that it's already there, that most technology is there for 99% of the people on Earth and the stuff until we discover a new thing we didn't know we needed, which is also part of the conversation.
If you were willing to wait a little bit to get your answer, you could do it for $5 grand.
Totally. Yeah. And if you're willing to wait all afternoon, you could use a Raspberry Pi.
You can do it for $100, right?
Right. Exactly.
Literally. We're not like,
so time is money. No, we're not really. Time is money.
Okay,
so people are paying to get to the front of the line with a, yeah.
Sorry, we got a weird delay today. Forgive me. I wanted to add that as the next step. So then everybody freaked out because it's like, oh, China is, is China our enemy or are they our friend, right? And that's kind of like a weird thing going on right now with like Trump hated TikTok and then he loved it and then he hated it and now he loves it again, and
right.
like, what are we doing here? We buy, Walmart is full of goods from China, but they're our enemy. And so I'm not taking a position on any of that. Like I'm an American and I like making stuff in America and I do it. That's my company. So like, you know where I stand. And anyway, but China is a global partner in manufacturing. So that there you go. We have to deal with it. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is we've been talking about this a long time and maybe it needs like a diagram, but the way that it was launched, a lot of people freaked out because they're saying first of all, it's censored. And then second of all, they're stealing your information. So the main thing to understand about these things, and it's true of any of them because they're all the same technology, is that there's two aspects of it that are important. The first is the training and the second is the model. So the training takes a lot of CPU or GPUs and a lot of energy and time. And then what the training produces is, think of it like a file. And that file is the thing that is called the model, right? That model is not now that everybody's like looked at it, the model itself is not censored. The model itself is the model, and it was trained using a bunch of stuff. Plus, it was using OpenAI and maybe Olama to like help train it. So instead of like raw data, it would basically talk to the other AIs, I guess you would say, and then it would learn with reinforcement from the other AIs. So since those AIs were not in theory censored, it can't be censored. The model itself can't be censored. So that's really important to know. So they took that model, which think of it just like a file, and they stuck it onto Hugging Face, and anybody can download that and anybody can use it anywhere. And when you use it, you're not like putting a worm on your computer. Like, these are really smart people. They know what's going in and out of their computers. You can run it and you don't even need to have it plugged into the internet. It can literally work without even being plugged into the internet, right?
Right.
That's not censored. What's censored is that in China, DeepSense runs servers, and they run their version of the model on an app, like on a web server. And when you go to DeepSeek and you type in a prompt, it goes through their server to the model. And then there's something in the middle that basically says, take out everything that says something bad about Xi, take out everything about Tiananmen Square, take out everything. And it just dies. It just doesn't give you an answer or changes it or something. That's the censor. That's the filter, right? So it only happens while you're talking to it or working through their servers.
Right.
And while you're working through their servers, the same thing applies as everything else, like TikTok or Facebook or anything.
Right.
You're sending information, you've given them permission to look at your cookies and all the stuff that you're doing. So they're saving all of that. They're saving all your prompts. They're saving all the back and forth. They're saving the answers, all that stuff. And they're going to use that to help train another model, likely.
Right.
And also maybe, I don't know, do some psyops. Who knows? Who knows what they're going to do, right? But it's the Chinese government.
And you have... Yeah. Also, real quick, I just want to clarify in this aspect of it as well, is that what Rob's saying is the app is not the underlying software. And so the DeepSeek model, Right, that's what I mean. So I'm speaking, in layman's terms in those regards.
Yeah.
So the software that is percolating below the zeros and ones that we're often talking about is different from the user interface. So there's an app that makes it easier to digest a piece of software on your phone. It's meant to be. Think of a big like Photoshop shrunk down on your phone. It has to be modified to be able to be used on your phone. So you have this shorter app that's easier to interact with. There is a filter in that app in the DeepSeek model on iOS and Android, and I don't know if they have a downloadable desktop. I wouldn't fucking use it, but you can, that you could download, as far as the program DeepSeek versus the R1 model that is the architecture, the DNA behind it. What Rob's saying, I think, is that in the building of that model, they're piggybacking on top of ChatGPT and everybody else's work, but they're also not limiting the amount of information. They're putting a throttle in between the language of the model, what it's been trained to do, and the user somewhere along the chain, creating like an intellectual bottleneck, saying nothing. There's like a giant Gandalf standing there going, "None shall pass." That was more like the Black Knight from Monty Python, but you get my point. Anyways, so it's not the model that has been told Tiananmen Square didn't happen and that the Chinese population is really 1.4 million and whatever. It's the app's throttle that does that. It's their,
right.
And they use that specifically so that the public in China can't access that information as well, because you can't show it off to your own people and then pick it up through a VPN and go, "Hey, notice it says 2 different things in 2 different countries about your stuff." That's why TikTok's outlawed in China. Same reason, right? Because they know the damage it can do and they know what they're trying to control, so they don't allow it at all. So,
right.
But the model knows all this stuff because they didn't train it. They borrowed that training from Western AIs.
They trained it, but they used other models to help train it. So by virtue of doing that, it's
already in there.
In theory, has the information.
Right.
That's the best way to maybe say it. So now Perplexity loaded up R1, and you can use DeepSeek, which is R1. You can use it through Perplexity, and you're not using it through the Chinese company. So if you want to use DeepSeek R1 and you don't want to go through DeepSeek.ai or whatever it is, you can go to Perplexity and it's the same model, except it doesn't have the filters on it.
Yeah.
In theory. Now it has plenty of stuff that Perplexity's doing, and they're doing similar things. They're just a U.S. company under U.S. laws, and they're going to be held accountable for anything they do wrong eventually. There's a lot of talk about that, but we can get into that. They have their own things. Like they might put a filter on that says, "We don't want you to use this to do something bad that we might be liable for," as a for instance. So they have different reasons to do these things. And if you don't want any filters at all, you can download the model and try to run it on your computer at home, unplug from the internet, and you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
Okay. The last thing that's funny to me is that the company that funds it, owns it, whatever they call themselves, is a hedge fund.
Right.
Do we understand how hedge funds work? The purpose of a hedge fund is to go against the norm.
Yeah, they're hedging against the markets.
They're hedging against something, right? They think it's going to go down, so they hedge against it going up, or the opposite. So this isn't a VC. This is a hedge fund. So, like, who knows if what they did is what they did, but it would be very clearly obvious that a hedge fund might short NVIDIA and then launch DeepSeek, knowing that everybody's going to freak out about it. And they just made a whole bunch of money on shorting NVIDIA, and NVIDIA goes down, and then it eventually comes back up because everybody's
which is what it did.
Well, like, I guess.
Also,
in the middle. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Finish what you're thinking, because you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say in the middle, it's going to take some time. And now stories are coming out. Oh, yeah, China has 50,000 H100s.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that was bullshit. And even if it's true that they didn't, and they came up with some, and they might have, I've read some articles about how clever they were about using the GPU's hardware in a way which like circumvented or didn't go through CUDA. And it's interesting what they might have
Right.
done, but you don't know if it's true or not. And a lot smarter people are looking at it than me. But
Right.
if they did, everybody's going to figure it out, and it's all going to be implemented into everybody else's models from here on out. So
Right.
that's the way open source works.
Yeah, and they basically you're like the difference between hot wiring a car versus making a car and selling it. Like they're selling a new car as if it's theirs and they hot wired it, which is fine. Also, NVIDIA makes the chips, not necessarily the models themselves. So they make the processing hardware, which is why they're so important to this equation. And it's not necessarily impressive that if you have 100 or 1,000 or 50 of their old cards, you can run this thing. If they have, if people, in the West or in the open market can buy one chip that runs at 25 watts or something that can run the whole thing. So NVIDIA is moving towards a direction where you can do it all with one small chip, very low power outage, intake, very low heat output, all that kind of stuff, which is the advances, which is what they're trying to do. It's like saying I have a car that has I got a Mustang that has 500 horsepower or whatever, and then I have a Toyota and I've stacked like 14 Mustang engines on the hood. I can't see through the windshield, but it goes just as fast. There's an element of it would be like
you're not adding anything. You're using the engine as it exists in the Toyota in this theory, but you've done something to change the way it worked so that it had more horsepower. That's effectively what they're saying they did. They're saying that it's the exact same older model. What they say they did is they used the older model of NVIDIA chip, and they coded the way that it works a little different, for lack of a better way to explain it, so that it was more efficient when it trained it. And maybe that's true. Absolutely. And if it is, we've been talking about this the entire time. Like everybody's freaking out about AI using all this energy, and the obvious arc of this thing is that it's going to continue to get more efficient and use less energy. It's going to happen. That's what everything does.
That's the one area where I feel like my gorgeous hair has been on fire about this whole thing was because I'm like, there's no situation where we need a fucking nuclear plant to run these things if the arc of the computations is getting more efficient and better known, and we're using the power we already have. We've trained to this level, and the model, the Rob Glenn 99% rule is such that you can take this thing and it will iterate itself in the same zone as sort of robots building robots, which is eventually where we're going to get, where the efficiency of labor gets so cheap that you almost reach zero. It doesn't mean there's going to be, more energy required for this thing. It just, and most of the people selling the idea that is true, you read their shit, they want to do crypto mining. They think Trump's going to inflate crypto, and they want to, that's what Elon Musk's big giant AI center in Memphis is a crypto mining facility. He's counting on this asshole kicking it off. And he wants Doge to be right up there with Bitcoin. So he wants to pre-mine his own shit, even though he owns 51% of Doge as a coin. That's what this is. It's not, they aren't building big AI centers that are going to require this. It's antithetical to the arc of technology every fucking time. Again, think, and to my Toyota versus Mustang analogy, the idea that if you took a Model T engine and instead of improving that engine like we have over time technologically to the point of a modern internal combustion engine, right, and ICE, you just took the same engine and went, let's make it more powerful by sticking another one next to it and another one next to it, to an absurd level where the weight capacity of it and the power draw and the inefficiency of the diesel fuel that you were using and you had to hand crank all of them at the same time to get them started. It's silly, but that's that's why the efficiency is natural to the circumstance, because there's a limit on power, there's a limit on heat, there's a limit on how much a circuit board can maintain as far as processing capacity. And so if you just keep stacking, eventually you cook yourself, which is why all these crypto mining facilities, like, they're burying, these like PCs with all these video cards. They're putting them in water and running water past the circuitry, just to keep it cool. I mean, they look like salmon farms. I'm not kidding. It's fucking stupid.
So the value of cryptocurrency is beyond my logical way of, I don't understand why what is what it is. But if the same thing were to happen to mining that just happened in this situation, and if this situation is true, if you could mine crypto in half the time with half the power, you would like ruin crypto. Like,
right.
I'm not sure if the value is directly tied to how much it costs to mine it, but I think it might be.
Sort of.
If not, you could like gain so much crypto, you'd be the richest person in the world because you're like out mining everybody, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So it's naturally true that in time, I'm sure somebody's working on it. How do we mine crypto with half the power? How do we mine crypto with half the processors, right? And that's going to happen. The thing about AI, which is the most fascinating, however, and this the 99% rule that you keep talking about, is that my theory is that 99, like what it is right this second, is good enough for 99% of the people.
Yes.
Okay. It's like,
yep.
We're not like nuclear scientists here. We're not trying to like track weather.
Fold protein molecules. Yeah, right.
We're just writing emails and Word docs, and you might like want to, it can practically file your taxes right now. Like if you used it right.
Yes.
So the work, like what is the purpose of making it better for the value of a consumer society who the only way they can make money on, the only way OpenAI makes money is they either create a product that everybody buys, or they create a service with their product behind a wall that everybody wants a subscription to. And that's what their API is. So if China as a country wants to screw with large AI companies, essentially what they're going to do is they're going to like take away that wall. They're going to like say, oh, we can just plop this model that works just as well as the one behind your paywall that anybody can use on a computer. And this is where it gets the most fascinating, is that the use of AI in the future, the logical use will be not connected to the internet.
Right.
So it'll be in edge compute. It'll be in your watch, let's say, or in your phone, or in your TV, or
car in your house,
a box in your car. Like, and those don't have to be. It already is almost there.
Yes.
Where it doesn't have. Technically, this is why Hal like puts up these little computers. Like the point that he's doing is to try to say, like, it's already capable.
Keep talking.
It's already working on this little computer. And it's pretty darn good, doing a lot of really crazy things, right? So,
okay. So wait.
So our point
you're
is
right on the
that,
money. Let me. I'm going to illustrate the point. Okay, this right here. Okay, this is a camera that goes onto a Raspberry Pi or like a little edge computer, or it's anything you build into a piece of electronics. If you were building a toy and it had to have a camera in it, this is basically the model thing that you would use. It's a little chip with a camera built on the front of it. There's a little, that's the lens cap. You can see the actual lens there, okay? It's a teeny little camera, okay? This is the same, the one on your phone is flatter and smaller and better and more expensive or whatever, but this is cheap. This was like $20. And it has a little ribbon that runs out all the coding on it out to whatever you're plugging it into. Okay. Let me explain something to everyone. This is like maybe 2 years ago. This is the same size model you would buy to attach to one of these edge computers, one of these little tiny boards like I've been holding up that do a lot now and used to do a little. This is an AI version. And the reason it's an AI version, this is right to Rob's point, is that the chip base behind it, the thing that's in right behind the camera frame itself, right behind the lens there, built into this, separate from whatever you attach it to, is a very small AI model that is trained for one particular job.
Right.
All it does is separate animals, vehicles, signs, buildings, and faces. So it's built, like you plug this in and you go, it's this kind of thing. Suddenly the computer you have it attached to will start putting blocks around people's faces when they're walking around, and we'll start doing that with animals. It will recognize the vast majority of animals. And if you say, I put this in in the fucking woods and I'm looking for deer, and you can go, just look for deer. It's got all the animal models that have been programmed or known that they tried this on that's in there, and it will just stop putting boxes around anything but a deer. And you can, that's what these things do now. And it's not attached to the internet. It doesn't have to go check with the internet to see if that's a deer. It doesn't have to go to the board it's attached to and ask that board if it's a deer. It's built into this thing, and it just says, hey, deer, and sends it out the ribbon. I mean, I'm dumbing this down, but I think this should be fairly clear.
No, you're accurate.
But the point of this is, this little thing right here, while it wasn't impossible 3 years ago or 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, it was impossible for me to buy it for $20 on the internet and attach it to a board that cost me $60 that can house an AI model that I could put inside my little R2 that I'm working on, which is why I got this. I have one of those speakable R2 toys from a while back where you could tell it to dance or play hide and seek or those kind of things, and I'm cracking it open and doing my best to make it a real one, just as a project, just so as a learning thing, because I'm a nerd and that's what I do, to not go crazy in the modern world. But can you hear me? Okay, you there?
I can. We asked people to try to put questions in Friday AI on Discord, but I'm not seeing
where the questions
for some
are?
reason that they're like truncated on my screen. So I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Oh, no, not at all. So, okay, I'll look it up on mine and see if I can go there. So, and this is super cheap, uses almost no energy, is available to anyone. And back to the point about R1 and open source.
Yes. So there's a lot of really good things about R1. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And it's entirely probable that some Chinese scientists made some advancements. Absolutely. They're not evil. They're smart people.
Right.
they're just like us. They're working at doing this. Now, who's ever funding them might have some different ways of dealing with it or whatever. But at the end of the day, the technology is going to advance, whether it's some Chinese scientists or some European scientists or American scientists, it's going to happen. And my big thing on this is that everybody's so concerned about who's training and who's running the models. And I think that's nobody knows how to use it yet. So the people who are the money will not be made in OpenAI, in my opinion. If I'm looking at this and I'm like, what's more logical? The money will be made in who figures out how to use it really well, and the actual application of it.
Agreed.
And if you start to think about the way that you're showing decentralized components, for the foreseeable future, you're going to have to sort of focus the model to do a particular task. So these applications are going to be focused applications until the hardware and the software sort of catch up to be able to do more generalized things. Mm-hmm. And that's where this idea of it's what is AGI? We got to stop thinking about this AGI concept because the technology, the power of the technology is actually having like very high powered capabilities on tiny little things, and then distribute those across your whatever, like your manufacturing floor,
so two
or your
things.
car.
Yeah, right. So Robin is asking in the Friday AI chat on the Discord, what is open source? And I think that's fairly simple. I'll let you describe it real quick as I shut my door. So
I'm going to do it from a non-technical. I'll try to do it from a non-technical standpoint. So,
all right, this I want to see. Rob Glenn not speaking technically. Okay, let's do this.
Okay, so think of this like normally we think of a product being developed by a company, and the company is going to go hire the people it takes to develop that product. Open source, in theory, wouldn't have a company. It's just a bunch of people that get together and decide together that they're going to go do this thing. And forget about the economics of it for a second. They communicate effectively through like a Discord or a Slack, or like they call it GitHub. It's basically just a website where everybody talks to each other. And so you take this big thing that needs a lot of different people to work together on, and you basically like divvy up the work. Or you don't even divvy it up. People just they choose to take it, and they're like, I'm going to work on this, and another person, I'm going to work on this, and they all kind of work together on these little things, and then they send their work to the place where everybody shares it, and then somehow, some way, the group decides what becomes the product, and then all of that works through that group. That's effectively open source.
Yes, and one addendum I would add to that is that someone makes something and says, this is open source. I have discovered a way of making a pan, and somebody goes, cool, I like your pan. I put a handle on it for mine because I make dishes in it that are too heavy. And another person said, well, I put two hands on it because I cook turkey pie all the time and it's really fucking heavy. So I made this. You're not going to want to sell this as the two-handed pan because nobody needs this but me. But I was able to take the pan you designed and add my shit onto it and do that. And so a lot of people take open source and use it specifically for their own purposes where it's not meant to even come back. And then sometimes they will go, this is so useful, I'll share it with the community, and then they will grow on it. Somebody go, I like your two-hand pan thing. My family's added a second one because we all eat giant piles of mashed potatoes, and it takes two of us to carry it to the table. So that, the point I'm trying to make is that you can take open source stuff, you can contribute to the greater product, like OBS, which is the software I use to stream, and people can test it on their things and go, hey, this works, this doesn't work, before releasing it as a thing, or warning people like, hey, you can try this, you can add this little feature, but it will crash your shit. And the example I would give is, so I stream to Instagram, hi Instagram people, and 4 other sites at the same time because I trust no giant tech company with my future. And so because I'm able to do that, the software that I use sends one source out to Restream, and it bifurcates it or quadricates it out to the networks that I want. And then it also has this little vertical plugin that makes a vertical version of the show that I have reframed and sends it off to Instagram by itself. Okay. There is a thing within OBS that's called studio mode, where you can go, okay, this is the scene I'm doing. This is the scene that's next. And so you can put it in studio mode, and then while you and I were talking or something, I could change something that's happening in another frame, and then when I transition, that change will show up. If I try to use that with the vertical plugin running, the whole thing crashes. My screen turns blue, the whole thing falls apart. And it's because it's open source, and the people who made it didn't think of that, right? Didn't effectively understand that somebody might have that use case, and therefore, if you're doing this use case, this shit won't work. So that's the positive and negative of open source.
Right. So now in this world, if Hal was a programmer, Hal could say, I'm going to take the source code for this thing and I'm going to change it so that it works this way. And then the work that you did, you're going to send back to the group, and it's going to get implemented into the main software. So you take your little thing and you add your little feature, we'll call it, and it becomes part of the whole. So I've seen a couple of questions. I compared it to my my earphones are going out.
Oh,
Can you
dear.
check for me? Okay.
Yeah,
Sure, hold on.
yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes
I got
they'll
another.
drop,
I got another
to.
one. Hopefully, it's not going to go
I run
out.
into the same thing. It's the Chinese. They're trying to attack us. I get it. No,
Yeah.
that's all right.
So is it? So I think one was, is it better or worse than? So it's. So there's rules for. If you use it, there are rules if you use it that you're held to. One example is that Truth Social basically used Mastodon and didn't credit the fact that it was
Right.
Mastodon. They were saying they coded the whole thing themselves. That's against the rules of using
Open
the
source stuff.
source start point. Now they could have built something on top of it, which was their own, but they had to.
Right.
You're supposed to credit that you use the thing that you started with. That's very similar to the way that this DeepSeek worked, and that's why they had to put the model out, because China's trying to tell a story here that they're just like global ambassadors of AI, and they're just trying to help the community. So in order to do so, they had to give the model back to the open source community and tell them certain things about it. In a similar way, if you don't give credit, then that organization might, or that group of people might come after you and say, hey, like, you got to give us credit or stop using it. And then the next question would be, like, how does that differ or work or whatever with a corporation like a Microsoft who has a closed system? How does that work? Does any have an advantage? There's a lot of people that argue both ways, that one is like open source is better than closed. Some people say it's the opposite. Typically, the pro and the con is that if you are a company and you want to run Microsoft Outlook, then you're probably better off using Microsoft Outlook as opposed to an open source, something like Thunderbird, because if your whole system goes down because of some bug, who are you going to call? Right? Now, some companies, for instance, Facebook, they built Facebook off of MySQL. So in order to do that, they had to start with MySQL, and they had to be a contributor to MySQL. And that's the start of what the beginnings of their database is, right? Oracle, or is it not Oracle? Sun Microsystems did the same thing. Apple's OS is built off of Linux. So the core, the starting point of Apple's OS is an open source thing. And then they built their stuff on top of that. So you can see all these different things implemented in different ways.
Okay, so real quick, Brad was asking about crypto. Okay, let me explain crypto mining real quick as best I can. Okay, think of math as dirt. This should be easy for you. Dirt and rocks and stuff. So the dirt is 1 + 1 = 2, and the granite is high order algebra, and molten lava, which if you dig deep enough, you will run into in the earth. And how to get past it is the trig of math. Okay, so the way they created crypto was the idea that there's only going to be effectively 25,000 crypto coins ever. They exist in the blockchain as singular things, and no one has access to them but through solving certain mathematical equations. So what all the compute and you can solve these equations to get a whole Bitcoin, or you can solve these equations to get a part of a Bitcoin. The solution to get to a part of a Bitcoin is way easier. It's like panning for gold in a stream, whereas getting a whole Bitcoin will require giant mining equipment, and you'll have to dig way deep into the earth because you'll have to figure out how to get through different levels of dirt and granite and stuff without it caving in on you and you dying. So this all happens in math in a computer. And so you need, to pan gold, you just need a pan. So you need the lowest level of computer to pan a 0.00000000001 Bitcoin. Right? Like a less than a millicent of a Bitcoin can be mined with a regular home computer. You add a video board on it, it can handle higher calculations. Same reason video cards are used for AI, because they can handle a lot of computations at once. The very thing that gives you ray tracing and light reflections properly in a video game, so that when the sun's over here, the light bounces off it properly and your reflection is on the water, takes a lot of computation to make that happen. And that's why NVIDIA is way ahead of everybody else. That's what the video cards are for. So crypto guys at one point were buying up the highest level and the most amount of video cards they could possibly find and slamming them into PCs and turning them into crypto mining computers, which just all they do all day long is try to solve these computations that are constantly changing until they find a way to click past one level and then go to the next one. And they basically claw their way through this tunnel of math till they finally find a Bitcoin. All right. And their value is the difficulty of getting them and how little there is. It's based on the concept of gold. It's digital gold in this regard. Here's the problem. I mean, a myriad of problems, other than the fact that, like gold, the only value for crypto right now is regular lumps hiding their money somewhere in a thing that they think they could just put in a jacket in the closet, like Menendez. But it's also the currency of anything that can happen above board. So gold is traded these days for guns and human beings and drugs, because nobody can regulate the currency aspect of it, the fiat currency of it. A government can't say, hey, you can't have our dollars anymore, or roll in there, find their dollars amongst your shit and set fire to it, and all your money goes away. So the idea was crypto was supposed to be this new digital gold. So these machines, through mathematical equations, dig for crypto in these things, and it takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of calculations, because it's very complicated. That was the point, in making it very difficult to find, and so that's what everybody jumped into. The idea being that nobody can get your shit, nobody can steal your crypto once it's in your little wallet. Only you know the code to get into this thing, and I guess they could beat you with a rubber hose and get it out of you, but the government can't force you to give it up or even know that it exists, because it's completely off grid. That was the promise of crypto. And then the FBI figured out a way to break into it using a myriad of different things. Mostly it's because people have to write that 12-word code someplace so they can remember it, because laziness and crypto go hand in hand, it seems. But the other thing is that it takes so much energy to do it, and there's no guarantee that it's just as worthless as setting up a gold mine and not finding any. Like, the amount of R&D and just exploration money that you would have to put into it doesn't guarantee you're going to come back with any. And most people who just traded in it early on made more money than the people who were trying to mine it. So it fucked with the whole thing. Here's the other part. Because it's all based on the idea of the complexity of these equations and how hard it is for computers right now, or at least 8 years ago, to do this shit, guess what's made it a lot easier? AI, kids. Not only has that furthered the speed of computers to the point where the early miners were using early NVIDIA video cards, but they can now use NPUs, these neural processing units, which are slightly grown-up versions of GPUs, to do this mining. But quantum computers are right around the corner. And governments and enormous companies like Google are already experimenting with it, arguably already have them online. And a quantum computer can not only crack your crypto wallet in a fucking second, it can also mine for crypto at a speed that you could have, fields of these high-level NVIDIA, NPU cards in these PCs running nonstop 24 hours, and a single quantum computer could crack all of that and just go one whole Bitcoin. Bink, thud, and that's the end of the worth. And then at some point, and I'm not sure when, the limit on how many Bitcoin can exist was cracked or undone. The original guy who created it, I think, was limiting it at 25,000. There can only be that. So they'll, just like gold, there's only a certain amount. All the gold in the world could fit in 2 Olympic swimming pools, and that's what gives it value. So the idea was based on the same thing with Bitcoin. Now, because it's digital, you can make it exist through just looking for it. And so, they had to make it, it became more complicated to get it too, because if it was easy, it'll just keep making it. And so what's the fucking use? Like toothpaste. It just goes and there it goes. So what happened is that quantum computers ultimately could kick in and, like Rob was saying, just be like the Machina del Oro, the gold machine for the who's at home, if you've seen Hudson Hawk. The idea that if alchemists could turn lead into gold, it wasn't that, oh my God, look at all the gold you'll have. It's, oh my God, how worthless has gold become? Because once we could turn lead into gold, we could turn pretty much anything into gold. So what the fuck is the point of having gold? And if you don't believe me, look at the diamond market, artificial versus real. There is no singular difference. It's just now a spiritual thing that people talk about. It's very hippy dippy, but the value of a manufactured diamond versus one that occurs naturally, it's meaningless now, right? There was a dude, I remember maybe it's like 6 years ago, a guy in a meeting of early on walked into this thing and they said, okay, what's your product or whatever? And he pulled a fistful of yellow diamonds, which were very rare, specifically like perfect cut, yellow in tone, no faults in them, out of his pocket, which is like hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Because of their rarity and whatever. And he went clack on the guy's desk. And the guy was like, what is this? And he's like, that's got to be glass or something. Nope. They're pure yellow diamonds, flawless, and we can make them. We can make them in all we want. It's just super easy. We don't even need to mine industrial diamonds for drill tips or any of that shit or coating things anymore, which is what they used to use. They used to pulverize leftover diamond shards to make drill bit covers and shit so things would last longer. Masonry drills and stuff famously have a little bit of diamond on them, which is amazing. Now we can just make it. We just make it in a factory. We can make something hot enough with enough pressure because of modern technology. We can just make fucking diamonds. And so diamonds effectively are not worth anything. It's the cut and the arrangement of the thing and the romance of it, but it's not the diamond itself. The same thing is true if you had a gold machine. Well, the same thing is true of crypto. It's just a matter of when. Because at a certain point, computers, the Rob Glenn 99% rule, is going to, every time we move forward, computers get cheaper, use less energy, more powerful, and whether we use it or not, it's all there. And all of these computers are going to be able to mine crypto at one point, and I can't wait to watch that episode of Tommy Bilyeu's Impact Theory. Because he's thrown everything into crypto. He thinks it's freedom. He thinks it's the perfect way to get around government control or whatever, because he's basically becoming Roseanne. A cross between Roseanne and Ichabod Crane. But he thinks that it's the perfect way to keep, he thinks taxation is theft, all that horse shit. And he thinks crypto is the solution. I got news for you, buddy. At some point, whether it's North Korea or Russia or the U.S. government and the FBI or somebody, they're going to figure out a way to not only make all the crypto you want and something, decode all of it instantly, or they're quite frankly just going to be able to crack your wallet if you violate the law or they don't like you or they just want to steal from you.
Yeah, so so blockchain is basically like a ledger. It's basically a list of all the transactions that like if you were to follow a penny around in its lifetime, and you literally had a way to like write down every transaction that penny was used in. That's kind of like what the blockchain is. And
in three places. That's why blockchain's good, is because it computers that don't know each other keep track of it. So if it magically showed up in a ledger someplace else and was in a locked box, so even the people there didn't know what they were tracking, so they can't steal.
The point is, the way I like to think about it is when you like use your credit card at a terminal at the grocery store, they trust Visa to basically like that transaction. Visa says, yeah, that's okay. You're who you say you are.
Right.
And we're going to they effectively give a loan to not a loan, but they give money to the grocery store before you've given them money. Right. So the whole point of Visa is to make sure that transaction is accurate, and if it's not, then they lose their money. Right. So crypto is kind of the same way, where the whole point of mining is to verify that the transactions are accurate or that they happened at all. And it's kind of like you want to write every single transaction that ever happened in that Bitcoin to that ledger, and then you want to check if the ledger is accurate. And so mining is effectively the process of doing that.
Yes.
And it's not quite, it's actually, I'll call it dumb luck. It's like not that different than brute force password hacking. And so if you have enough, like everybody's basically just guessing what the hash is. The hash is like, you're comparing whether ledger 1, 2, and 3 are all the same. So you're looking for the number that tells you that they're all the same. And you're literally just guessing. You're just constantly guessing. And the computer, literally the computer that guesses right, gets the Bitcoin. They earn the Bitcoin for having checked the transactions. And so when the little transactions are almost always people who group together to try to calculate those things. And together, all their computers together happen to crack the $105,000 Bitcoin. So they all split the $105,000. And that's where those tiny little transactions come in. So like I said, it's your diamond thing is actually, I think, a pretty good one. When they started being able to manufacture diamonds, then all of a sudden the scarcity of diamonds wasn't part of the value of diamonds. Like the whole reason diamonds were worth what they were worth is because they turned it into a scarcity problem. Well, if you can just flood the market with diamonds, they're not worth what they were worth anymore. And so if you can just guess that number like infinitely every time, then crypto's not worth what it's worth anymore, in theory. Let's maybe there's a few questions. So Jay Gambrill asked, tell me how to use these apps, AI, and stop them from accessing your personal information using a technology is one thing, but this DeepSeek is supposed to access all your stuff if you use it. So we tried to explain this before. DeepSeek will, in theory, access your information that you allow them to see on your phone, just like any other application that you give access. You give permission for every app practically to do something on your phone, to track you. Facebook does it, Google does it, Apple does it, everybody does it. The only way that DeepSeek as a thing would be tracking you is if you use the DeepSeek app specifically. If you used DeepSeek R1 on Perplexity, then the Chinese company is not who you gave access to. You gave access to Perplexity. So maybe that helps. So if you don't want quote unquote, a Chinese company to have access then to the things that you've given access to, you can't put it on your phone and give them access. That includes everything. That's TikTok, that's DeepSeek, anything that's managed in China. Think of it like another company. It's just a country, not a company.
And it's to that point. I'll show you real quick. I just want to pop this in here. So Perplexity, in case you're confused, is kind of like OpenAI's ChatGPT or the like. It's not the company. It's their model / interface that they create within Perplexity. It has, I believe, access to several different models. That you can try and talk to and blah, blah, blah. And if you'll see right down here what Rob's talking about, try DeepSeek R1, now available in Pro Search and hosted in the US. So they've taken this version and they host it on a server, and then you can filter your stuff through there to see if it responds well or if it's designed proper, if it used, but your stuff doesn't go to China because they've just taken that model and recreated it here. And that's the thing about open source that we were talking about.
They didn't recreate it. No, they didn't recreate it. They literally downloaded it from Hugging Face and put it on their server, and their server runs it.
Right. So they house a version of it here, kind of like a zoo. You know what I mean? Like, yes, China has the right to all pandas. But if you blow kisses at a panda in a zoo in America, the ones in China don't feel it. It's a panda in a zoo. You understand? So it's separate.
It's
My
like
analogies rock,
it's
by
like
the way. I think I gotta
AOL
say,
sent a bunch of CDs with
yes,
AOL on it, and they
right,
like took the CD from China and they stuck it on their computer, loaded AOL on their computer, and then you access their computer to use the software on their computer.
right,
But it's not
yes,
going back to China. Like that's the part that's really hard to understand. Is like you can use the model, and the model doesn't call home. Like it doesn't work that way. It literally
right,
is like a self-contained thing that you use. And Perplexity's got a whole bunch of IT people. If it did call home, a company like Perplexity would not have it on their system, or they would tell
yes,
you that it was calling home. Like they know what's happening. They
yeah. They can
monitor
see,
their IT
yeah.
infrastructure and their network. They know if it's calling home, and it's not.
And it's very and the reason people are nervous about this is because of hardware issues with Chinese stuff before,
Yes,
which is
exactly.
both Huawei and like the TP-Link and the like home routers. A lot of them, when they found that a big bunch of them that were made in China, they were loaded with like I don't know, reciprocating hardware that would bounce whatever was going through it to China via the internet through a coded funnel was the idea, is that or could be accessed that way, whether it was or not. It had the ability to do it at some point, or it could receive messages via the internet in a coded way to shut down at some point in the future. That was one of the other big concerns, especially around like, can you imagine if you can't shut down the internet because you'd have to cut all the cables and blow up all the satellites in the sky, but what if you could kill everybody's Wi-Fi all at once? And that was what arguably these Chinese machines were capable of doing, and that's why they were being purged, both in the government and in the important things. So they were, anybody with a class 3 or higher security issue, ports, airports, seaports, trading areas, customs warehouses, any of that shit, where border patrol areas, anything that relates to the National Guard, all those kind of things, even buoy sensor equipment that gets its information, and brings it back, like those kind of things. If they had that tech in it, they had to swap it out because it'd be shut down all at once.
I'm going to kind of move along a little bit. We got a lot stacking up. So in general, there's a lot of people going back and forth on this. I'm just telling you, you can download R1. You can unplug your computer from the internet. You can do what you need to do to run O1 on your computer. And you can use R1, which is the same thing as DeepSeek, and it's not calling home. Like, you're not giving your information to China. It's not happening.
That's right.
It's the way it works.
That's right.
There's all kinds of other ways China can, a hacker.
Way easier.
Hack into your, and they don't even need to hack into you because most people downloaded the stupid app and gave them permission to do it. And so that's the part, like everybody's missing the main thing. And that is like, you're so worried. A lot of people are worried about it stealing stuff, and it's not stealing it because you gave it permission to do it.
Right. So the two big things that everybody seemed to freak out about was, on that end, the Chinese, piracy and privacy aspect of it, which again, if you use the model, it can't do, but the app itself does it, just like TikTok, just like, because again, TikTok, for a long while could turn your phone and your mic on, your camera and your mic on your phone without your permission, and they got caught and they went, oh no, that was a glitch, we didn't do it, and basically you just have to trust them that it's not doing it now, and that there was some limits on on whether they got better at hiding it or whether they actually shut it off is a matter of question. That's the app itself. Now on the same thing is true of any app that you would get from a Chinese company, because we fixed that on TikTok, but everybody loves this like Animal Farm game or whatever, and that can do it even though there's no reason to give it permission. We just put that bug that we put in TikTok in that. So that's the concern with all apps.
The invasive part is all the sidecars, and like Facebook does exactly the same thing.
Totally.
Facebook does exactly, and Apple does it too. It's all.
But you have to give. But the difference is Facebook and Apple and stuff, because of the laws in this country and especially in the EU, have to let you know. Whether you look at the terms of service is sort of up to you. But now, I would recommend everybody when you're go to the terms. If you're worried about your phone or you're worried about an app you're using or whatever, you can copy paste the terms of service into ChatGPT and go, is there anything in this I should be really concerned about? Because privacy is important to me. And it will go, yeah, you might want to notice that this allows it to turn your phone on at scheduled times, whether you ask it to or not, and that kind of stuff. Or it can, anytime you've previously talked about things you want, it can listen for that particular word, if not the rest of it, those kind of things, which is what everybody worries about with Instagram, right? For example, like my phone is listening to me. It sent me an ad just as I was, talking about this with my friend. You can do that with that, but they legally have to tell you. It's in the terms of service if they're doing these things. The Chinese companies don't, and they have actually, and this is the part that I'm trying to stress to people, is that they have not only permission, but a directive from the Chinese government and the military to lie in the terms of service, to subvert those rules because they don't participate in those rules. You know, all the talk about the International Criminal Court and how the American... Right. And the International Criminal Court, America isn't a signatory to it. So if anybody, files something with the ICC, we don't have to, our president or our Congress people don't have to go over there and stand trial. Okay. So we don't really listen to them. It's sort of a moral line, but not a material line. Same thing. Only without the moral line. They don't care. So the Chinese government has directed, they own 51% or more in most of the companies. And I would argue more. I would say 60-40, but whatever. And even the 40%, I don't know what these fuckers get to take home because most of their millionaires and billionaires end up being sent to re-education camps. Don't believe me? Go look at what happened to Jack Ma.
It doesn't matter what the percentage is. Even if they have 1% and they say that they just take control of the company, it doesn't matter what they have.
You're right. Whatever the control point is. Like I'm thinking of it in terms of like American stock rules. That if you have 51%, you have control of the interest.
You can't think about it in American way. In the American way,
if they own 20% of it, they can just go, I have 20% and a gun. Right? It's like the mob. The mob would go like, you pay us protection to keep your pizza place open, right? And we get 10% of your earnings, right? So we kind of own 10% of the business, right? But part of our ownership is the gun I'm pointing at you right now, right? That's what gets me my 10%. And if I don't want you to serve some people, or I want you to sell something else under the table, that's up to me, even though I only own 10% of the profits. That's similarly what's going on. Leslie's asking how you use crypto. You don't. You hide.
Hal, I'm going to switch to my speakers on my computer. So if I start looping,
we'll figure it out. Yes, no worries. Yeah,
All
do
right.
that.
How am I doing?
Fine. I hear myself a little bit, but it's not going to hurt anything.
So Leslie has I'll just jump into Leslie's stuff. She's like, how do you cash in crypto for cash or buy stuff with it? There are exchanges and things like that. Like wherever your crypto is, you have to, if you want to get rid of it, you got to exchange it for some other currency. It effectively isn't. Right. It's like a stock.
Not a currency.
Maybe it's like a stock. That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
If you want to get the money out, you've got to cash in the stock. It's kind of the same way as the crypto. You got to sell it to someone, like an exchange or something like that.
And you can't. The most important thing is you can't use it to buy regular things. Like Eric Adams used it. Apparently, he was like the first mayor to take his fee in crypto in New York, and he was trying to push this line of it because he knew that he could. It's like, I don't know if they give you stock options in New York stocks or whatever, and then now you've got the problem with that is you now have a vested interest in making sure that crypto grows instead of just simply letting it do what it's going to do.
So in simple terms, if I have like a crypto wallet and it basically has an address, and that address lives, like it's on the ledger, this blockchain. So if I'm running a business or I'm just a guy and I want to go, think of it like a barter system. I mean, it works just like cash does. Cash doesn't exist either.
Right.
I love your analogy. It's a future sandwich.
Yeah.
$1 is a future, or $5 is a future sandwich. It's the same thing. So if I wanted to go get I wanted the neighbor's car, and the neighbor says, okay, I'm gonna charge you $5,000 for this car. I could go to the normal bank, get $5,000 in cash. I could give him $5,000 in cash. Or he could say, I want it in crypto. So whatever the value of crypto was that day, I could give him 0.000004 Bitcoin. And if that was worth $5,000, what I would do is I would effectively like transfer it to his address, just like you would do like a Wire or a Venmo or a PayPal. There's like systems that are very similar to that, and you would exchange it in that way. That's effectively how it's just like any other money in the way that, in theory, the way it works. It's just not. It's not like any other money.
Well, it's like any other digital transfer system for money, because ultimately you still have to turn it into whatever currency you're using, or people will accept. And so that's what makes it not a currency.
If you type in Bitcoin price into Google, and it'll show you the graph of what it's worth, it's telling you what it's worth in US dollars. So the only way to get US dollars is to exchange a single Bitcoin for $105,000 if that's what it's worth. It's kind of around there right now.
And find someone.
Okay, let's move on.
Also, if I may, my favorite thing about the BRICS guys was that they were going to create their own cryptocurrency, but they were going to peg it to the U.S. dollar because none of them could agree on which currency should have dominance, because the Chinese aren't going to agree with the Russians using the ruble as the thing to pay. So they're going to peg it to the U.S. dollar, which means all of the BRICS countries would have a vested interest in making sure that the U.S. dollar remains stable. It, like as alt plans for currency go, is one of the singular dumbest ideas I have. It's like if the Allies were like, we've set it up so that our army only grows in relation to the strength of the German army. Right? We got to make sure the Germans are making tanks so we continue to produce tanks. What the fuck?
Yeah, and it can get crazier.
It's insane.
This is from. I'm gonna move us along. Music.
Okay, thank you.
Someone named Music, or their YouTube name is Music. And Rob and Hal break down the debate between free software and open source. Typically, open source software is free, so actually those two are the same thing. But I'm gonna just guess what you maybe meant is like paid software. I'll use everybody knows what Photoshop is.
Yeah.
So there's Photoshop, and then there's a funny enough, it's called GIMP, GIMP, and GIMP is open source. It's graphic interface something
media.
It's called GIMP, I think.
Right, program.
Anyway, it's a bunch of people that got together and in an open source way basically made a Photoshop. It's not exactly Photoshop, but it's close. It's got a lot of the same tools. So you could go and download this software and you could use it, and there's nothing wrong with using it. It's limited to what it is. A good example actually is Blender, if anybody knows what Blender is. It's a very capable software. It's used in the film industry. It's used all over the place, and it's totally free. You can download it for free. What they say, though, is like, hey, it'd be nice if you donated a little bit, because and then they distribute that across different places because there's still costs involved in doing it. So what's the benefit or the breakdown? So in Photoshop, if you go online and there's a whole bunch of tutorials about Photoshop, if it breaks, Adobe fixes it. If they update it all the time, it's regular. So you're paying effectively for the company to support it. That's the key. With open source, you're not paying. So if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Yeah. You can fix it yourself, but maybe you're not capable of it, or you have to wait for the group to get around to fixing it. And there's pros and cons to both ways of going about it.
Right. Also, if they are talking about the free software aspect versus the open source, everybody contributes to the programming of it and can modify the stuff. Sometimes people, when they're making software, they don't want to update it or whatever. They created something, they like it. It's usually smaller programs or interstitial programs, and they just throw it out into the world and let people use it. But it's not usually the kind of high end and front end stuff that you see that turns into it's usually like routing software for IT guys, and like, hey, Gary made this thing or whatever. And in OBS, there's a bunch of guys that make little video plugins, which are in and of themselves singular software, but you can use them in OBS, you can use them in other video programs and through browser sources and other stuff, where they've created that piece of software just for everybody to use because they're being magnanimous or they're practicing. And that brings me to the Blender arc that you're talking about. So Blender is used in very big projects, but it is a learning curve on it, and no school is just teaching Blender. If you go to a design thing, they might introduce you to it, or if they expect you learned it before you came to Harvard or Yale or something like that, but they're not going to teach you how to use Blender for the movies, right? That kind of idea. So what they do is they give you a free version of it, and as long as you're using it for free shit or just making shit on YouTube or whatever, they don't care. Because people will know it's Blender, and you'll probably talk about it. So it helps them industry-wise. But then if you level up and you get hired by one of the big studios because you're good at it now because you've been using it for a while, you have to pay for it. If you're going to make your own projects with it, you pay for the next level of it,
I don't know.
Yeah.
The big studios don't even pay for Blender. I mean, they're asked to donate.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's a level that you have to pay for Blender.
Well, yeah,
they might be changing that.
Yeah, maybe like Hit Film is another example. Like that's a better example than Blender. I don't know what the rule is, but like Hit Film is one of those like video editing software that you can use to make things. And there's a free version of it that's like the student version. And Final Cut was a similar thing. You get a student version for free, but if you're going to edit real things, you buy a pro version.
We're actually now talking about non-open source versus open source.
Yes.
Because Unreal Engine is a really great example to compare against Blender. So Unreal Engine is not open source. It's built by the company Epic, but you can use it for free. And then if you do something with it, there's rules. Hey, you can use this for free as long as you make under $100,000 as a company. I think it's that, or it might be $500,000. It's some number. And then if you build a game on it and you go start selling it, they don't charge you to use Unreal. They charge you a royalty for your sales.
Yes.
So it might be, I don't know what the percentage is, but let's just say for the sake of talking, it's 10 or 15%. So if you've used that thing for free and made a game and then go make $1 million, you're going to give them a percentage of that $1 million.
Right.
Well, you're going to have to, or they're going to shut you down.
Yes. And like Call of Duty, for example, pays a royalty to Unreal to use that as the substructure of everything they build. So the programmers at Call of Duty and at Activision, they work on top of the Unreal thing. They design within it and all that kind of stuff. But and it saves them like the R&D money that you have to, if you had to pay them up front to use it.
Exactly.
Would undermine the entire industry. You couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford to grow, like all that kind of stuff. So this percentage version is like, hey, if you use our shit, throw us a slice of it, but we're not going to charge you up front a categorical like, $5 million starters fee to use our stuff.
So now let's say you're a studio, like a really big studio. You like have really good coders and people that run Blender. And you need Blender to do something very specific, but it doesn't do it. You could take your people and you could have them do something to Blender, work on Blender to change it. And there's different models for how to do it, but I'll just use this one as an example. You're not paying for Blender, but by using it and building the thing on top, you need to give it back to the community. So your payment for doing it is that you can't monetize the thing that you did.
Right.
To add to it, the part that you added to the software. There's a whole nother thing where you can make these things called add-ins, and you can actually make money on that. But there's rules around all this stuff. It's very complicated.
Right. Yeah. But and again, the important thing is, and I think as we want to kind of move back to kind of our AI concept, and again, the fear around R1 and the usage of these things. What I want to be really clear about is, much like you can move R1 to your desktop and it's not going to harm anything because it's internally there, or if you use it through a trusted source, the bottleneck isn't going to gather your details, like Perplexity, for example, beyond what you give it permission to. The same thing is true of all these apps. There's an element of, like in ChatGPT, there was one of the big advances was memory. It could remember conversations, and so you could keep a thread. You didn't have to keep a thread open all the time, so you couldn't shut your computer down because it would forget everything you'd been talking about the next time you opened it up. And what good is that? You're not going to create the agentic AI assistant situation. That's not going to happen if it forgets every time you turn your computer off, right? Or shut the program down. So they made it so it can remember things. Well, inside ChatGPT, there's a little, in the settings, there's a little memory button. And if you click on that, it opens up all the details that it has memorized that seem important to you. And you can go in and erase them. You can literally make it forget. You break up with somebody, you can make it forget that's your boyfriend or your girlfriend's name. And it won't know. It won't bring them up again. It won't say a thing. If you're like, I'm trying to die and I don't want to, I'm always joking with it when I'm talking about how much I like soda or whatever it was, RC Cola. And so you could go in there and go, it'll say likes RC Cola. You just scratch that out, and now it won't bring it up again unless you do. And then you can make it forget. The point is, you can now erase those memories. You have the right to make it stupid again, and the ability to do that, right? And that in and of itself is a safety precaution. You can also have temporary conversations, meaning this one does not go to the servers, it doesn't share with the servers, and it doesn't go beyond this chat window that I'm talking in. Once I turn it off, you don't remember it. It doesn't get sent to the reasoning computer at all. It doesn't get trained on it. Nobody's allowed to look at it but me and the model that's temporarily in RAM, essentially. I mean, it's a shorter version of it, but you don't get to use the best reasoning in that one, which is probably concerning. But at the very least, it's temporary because it's all private. It just happens on your computer with whatever's available in the computer you're using.
Yeah, so I mean, all of them have all these very complex. You're sharing some stuff, maybe you aren't other stuff. Mm-hmm. The key aspect to this is, as an American citizen in the U.S. using a thing, if you're working with a U.S. company, I know it's a big lift and it's hard to do, but you can sue the company if it's found that they misused your data based on the law, or they said they were going to do one thing and they actually did something else. You have recourse. It might be such a expensive long-term recourse that you'd never do it, but still you do. If you're doing that in another country, you don't have that recourse. It's that simple. Even though the recourse is not something you may ever use or be capable of using, but you never, there could be a class action lawsuit eventually about with Facebook or Twitter or X or whatever. Mm-hmm. All right, so I think there's a question. Do you think they can start using AI as air traffic controllers? After what just happened, I'm terrified for anyone I care about to fly. I just posted on Blue Sky an article. I've always thought that balls and strikes being called by umpires was really fucking stupid. Mm-hmm. When on TV there's a box and where the ball flew. But I posted an article, I think it was on ESPN, where they talked about why they don't do that. It's actually kind of difficult when you start trying to figure out how to, what about everybody's strike zone's different. The point I'm trying to make is AI in theory, in time, should be very capable of organizing aircraft in the sky and spatially make them so they can't run into each other. It's just not there anywhere close to being there yet. And if we can't, I wouldn't trust a self-driving Tesla car. I mean, there's been people dying in those, right? So we're just not quite there. But the trajectory is going in that direction. And in theory, if you've got all the sensors right and everybody knows where everybody is, then I would probably trust a computer to do it more than a human being after it was figured out well enough and tested and all those things.
Right. So a couple of things. I talked about this with my kid on Thursday about how I wouldn't trust it to make the decisions, but there is a data categorization capability beyond radar that could be beneficial that would come from AI that you could add to airports, which is that right now the radar systems that we have are really good. They really are. But they have a limit on what they can show you and what visually they represent, because it's meant to be rudimentary. There's a reason why we keep it very simple, because if it fails, it's easy to fix, which is a very important aspect of all of these things, because the more complex a system is, the more that can go wrong with it. So that's why we've defaulted back, and why it takes a long time for governments and companies that are bigger and have a lot more to lose to shift these things. Okay, so it's better to find this dot, and we've got a little transponder on the plane that tells me how high it is. I can check the number running next to it, so I see where it is, and I see that its height aspect of it. That doesn't necessarily help when it's a helicopter below a certain range where it can change its height. On airplanes, they can't, unless something drastic happens, they can't change their altitude that quickly, especially if they're a passenger plane, right? Whereas a helicopter absolutely can. So if you have those intersections, there's a lot of trust that goes on between this is happening and this is happening, and we assume these assholes aren't going to continue on the path that they are on, and that's partly what it seems happen here. And again, we don't know. So I would argue that there is a value towards this, and this is all about data and reasoning. I've been ruminating on this for the last couple of weeks, and then the crash really kind of brought it to bear on my thinking, which is that reasoning and being, making scientific and logical and well-reasoned decisions is the peak of sort of what we think of as intellectual thinking. You don't want to be influenced by emotion or superstition. You want to make the most reasoned decision, especially in very drastic circumstances. The problem is that reason is like math, and there's very little fluidity in it in a highly complex situation, and it's only as good as the data you have coming in. So a reasonable decision with only 3 points of information could turn out to be completely unreasonable if you suddenly have 8 points of data that go, wait, don't do that. If the other 5 outnumber the 3 that make you make this balanced decision between the 3 possibilities, and you now find like there's 8 possibilities, and the 3 you've been thinking on are the worst possible scenario, that's you were being reasonable before and unreasonable in a broader context. So the key to AI making those kind of decisions will not be its decision-making ability, because that you can establish. What will be important is the data, how it gets it, and how reliable it is. So setting up sensors and redundant sensors around every airport that can tell the difference between a plane, a helicopter, and a drone, and birds, and can track every fucking seagull on the runway at any given time and trigger something that brooms them away in between flights and doesn't trigger them to go when one's landing or taking off, those kind of things could be a valuable part of AI. But it really isn't the AI that's important, it's the data input. Because when we do have air traffic controller problems, the only reason stuff goes wrong is because of the limited data or the limited reflection on that data itself. Now, I want to show you something. Okay, there's a video I saw earlier this week, and I was like, remind me to show this to Rob when this happens, okay? And it's kind of crucial. This is an assembly line in Mexico. Remember when Trump was talking about, like, I have this friend who makes these factories, these turnkey factories in Mexico, and he goes, or the greatest factories in the world, and like, hey, can I see one? And he goes, no, we have to go to Mexico. And he goes, no, I want to see one here. And the guy says, nope, we got to go to Mexico to see it. Fuck you. Why don't you move this? I hate that this. There we go. this guy is at a factory where they make cars in Mexico. It's a BMW factory, and the car comes in here. This is the process. This area is where they form the parts. This is where they paint them, and this is where they assemble them. So it's the body shop where stuff is created. This is the paint shop, and this is the assembly line. There's almost no people working the line at all. There are guys walking around, like Rob has talked about, as sort of machine supervisors, so that if anything goes south, they can throw a switch and stop it so it doesn't destroy stuff by going through a cycle, or they find a glitch in this. But look at this fucking thing. What? Somebody tell me, where are the jobs that you're going to add moving this factory to, as far as auto manufacturers, like workers in a factory, when you bring this to the United States? You might have robot engineers who are going to have jobs, but
yeah, it's all in the setup, the maintenance of it, the building of it, but it's not every one of those robots previously was a person mounting that part
or
and doing that
three
thing. But tying this to like why you might not want robots to be doing managing airplanes in the air is very everything's always the same. Like this is a very controlled environment.
Yes.
Everything is exactly the same. And the thing that makes automation out in the real world difficult is all the other stuff. So like, let's use self-driving cars for a second. In theory, you would like look at the lines on the road and you would try to keep the car in the middle of the road with some cameras. Well, what happens if the lines are worn out? Or what happens if it's foggy? Or what happens if there's a big glare on the camera? Or what happens if there's construction and the lines...
Or some asshole bought a can of yellow paint and decided to fuck with everything. Right.
It's all the other stuff. It's all the other stuff. So when you get into like you're saying, like the amount of calculating and the amount of first you have to know that as you said, the data coming in is correct. You've got to have measured the right thing and then hope you didn't miss something.
Yeah.
And hope this other little thing doesn't go into the mix. And then, it's all it would work if you factored in all those things. And so in all of these things, the human is there to understand and evaluate whether the thing's gone off track and then get it back on track, recognize the situation, alter it. And humans are really good at that.
Yes.
So, to say now that we should just switch to AI there's all kinds of other upgrades to the flight controls and radar and stuff. It's all very old technology and it works really well. We don't have very many accidents and it's very solid state. It's, it doesn't, it breaks down sometimes, but they fix it. And, you might go a day without radar everybody has they figure out what to do when that happens. And they've got checklists to fallback positions and all that stuff. So there's a system in place is my point. And in order to move that forward, you can't just throw it all away and start again with something new. You have to sort of incrementally move it forward.
Sure. Because
you don't know what you don't know as you move into the new technology.
Yeah.
What do you? You're on donuts now. You were on BMWs, and now.
Well, no. This guy's making a point about how it uses LiDAR to judge what something is.
Oh, I see.
And how they do 3D and how they he's explaining kind of the nature by which all the things we're talking about, all the things it does wrong when it goes wrong, that they have to, they teach things through teleoperation, and then eventually it learns, and then over time it learns even more intrinsically difficult things, and this is the math involved, and there's a person showing how it works, helping load this piece in. There's one lady on that one, there's one in the car behind. They're doing very minimal stuff, but the reality is and the point I'm trying to make is that in him showing this is the very factory that Trump was talking about. And none of it involves hiring people who used to build cars in Michigan and putting them back on